Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream on time in full. Greg, how you doing?
Whoa. And really on time and in full. None of those secondary calculations,
That's
right?
right.
Where you convince yourself you're on time and in full and you're
Right.
not. Yeah.
Never. No. So, hey, we've got one of our most popular series we're continuing here today. It's like OG. It's an OG hour around here at Supply Chain Now. Supply
Always.
Chain
Yep.
today and tomorrow with Mike Griswold, with Gartner and Greg. Today,
Yes.
back by popular demand, right? For the people, it's Ask Mike Anything.
Yeah.
So if you've got a burning question to pose to our guru, hey, get them in and we're going to get Mike's take. Great. Big show here today, Greg, right?
Yeah. I've got my popcorn left over from the Elvis movie I watched last night, and I'm just going
Ooh.
to sit back and watch Mike answer. I know you have questions.
I do.
Have you seen it?
I have not seen Elvis yet.
Austin Butler, who is the young man who plays Elvis, the greatest Elvis impersonator ever. Sounds exactly like him. He does a scene, the famous scenes you've all seen from his show, his show in Vegas and all that sort of thing. I mean, 100% duplicate.
Wow.
I mean, not just able to do that crazy stuff that Elvis did, but I mean, you could overlay a video of Elvis and Austin Butler looks just like him. Anyway, it's great. If you didn't already hate Colonel Parker, which you should if you're an Elvis fan at all, you will unquestionably from watching this movie. Tom Hanks is brilliant in it.
I can't hate Tom Hanks.
Don't hate Tom Hanks. Don't hate the player. Hate the character.
Hate the game. Did any fried banana and peanut butter sandwiches make an appearance?
Not ever. No, not ever. But one of his habits early in the movie, they do show. I can't remember what it was. Yeah. So he was a twin. Elvis was a twin.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and his brother Scotty, died at birth, and he would always look up whenever he was looking up to the sky. That's what he was looking towards.
That is cool.
For a sign from Scotty. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to have the Elvis hour, maybe after we have the Mike Griswold hour. They're almost on equal footing, and Mike's got a slight edge in supply chain, I think, Greg.
Well, to quote the great EP, how about a little less conversation, a little more action?
Okay. All right. So we're going to say hello to a few folks here in just a minute. Folks, stay tuned. We got a great hour with the one and only Mike Griswold here. But before we say hello to a few folks, folks want to keep banging the drum on this opportunity, deeds, not words, to step up and help out folks in need in Ukraine, Poland, and elsewhere. So, of course, our dear friends at Vector Global Logistics are leading this effort, all about leveraging logistics for Ukraine, as the title suggests. As Greg updated us earlier this week, almost 10 containers have either landed or are on their way, full of humanitarian supplies for vetted needs, families in need that are hurting. So, these are driven by the working session. So Tuesday, July 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern time is the next working session. Folks, you don't have to be in position to give to join the meeting and just kind of get a sense of what's going on, to get a sense of the market intel, to get a sense of what the vetted true needs are from folks there, boots on ground. And, as always, if you're in position to give or donate or what have you, of course, that would be icing on the cake. So Tuesday, July 12th, 11 a.m. Eastern time. The link to join that is in the comment. And Greg, your final words on this this really important initiative here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great organization. Sit in, listen to the calls, or just reach out to Ukraine@vectorgl.com and volunteer anything you have, action, materials, time, whatever.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Make it easy.
Money also.
That's right. It's all very needed. Ukraine@vectorgl.com. It's just that easy. Okay, I see a lot of great folks in the comments. Of course, big thanks to Catherine, Chantel, and Amanda, the production team helping to make it happen. Good morning to you. Good afternoon to you, Catherine. Great to see you. Mike DeWerf, good morning from beautiful Telluride, Colorado.
Always
Greg.
Beautiful. Yes. Always
Man.
beautiful.
Mike, what's the snow report out there in Telluride, huh?
Let's see. They might be completely without this time of year. I mean, it's possible, right?
Well, regardless, Mike, great to have you here via LinkedIn. I'm looking forward to your comments on what we hear from Mike Griswold, and get your questions in. If you have a question you want to pose to him, Shelly Phillips, right around the corner in Golden, Colorado. Shelly, I've enjoyed your participation in our live streams as via LinkedIn. So great to see you. Hey, Daniel Hartnett, one of our favorites. It's been a little while. Greetings from Boston, everyone. Looking forward to some supply chain knowledge. Daniel, you're in the right place, my friend. Greg.
Especially today.
That's right. Let's see here. We've cornered the market on supply chain knowledge, at least for the next hour. My dear friend, Larry Grant, good morning from Noonan, Georgia via LinkedIn. Larry is one of those folks that specializes in GSD, getting stuff done. Saw it there. So great to see you, Larry, and really admire your approach to, in this case, helping folks find the talent they need. Victor Garcia via LinkedIn from Tijuana.
TJ, yeah, Tijuana. That's right.
So, Victor, great to have you here today. Rami tuned in from LinkedIn from Ottawa. Ever been to Ottawa, Greg?
Yep. Yeah.
You have?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, we're going to talk about retail supply chain today. I've worked with a couple retailers up there.
Okay.
I was up there quite a bit. So I've been to Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, of course, Montreal, and Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is probably still covered in snow.
Now, goodness gracious, you speak Spanish, you speak Latin, and now you're breaking out the Canadian on me, Greg. Come on, man.
Yeah,
we got to learn about all those adventures. But great to have you, Rami, via LinkedIn. Gene Pledger, dear friend from North Alabama. Great to see you here today via LinkedIn. As always, looking forward to your questions and insights on our discussion.
What did he say yesterday? Subtropical Alabama or something like that? Equatorial Alabama. Yes.
You're making an impact, Gene. Making an impact.
Yeah.
Patrick Kelly, host of the Produce Podcast, is with us here today. Patrick, it's been a long time. Hope you're doing well, and love the content coming out of your channels. Brenda Allen.
What was his buddy's name who had the family citrus business?
That
was a great story.
That was a great story. Patrick, you got to let us know. Me and Greg and you and one of your friends jumped on a podcast probably a couple summers ago. So let us know about that. Brenda Allen is back. She says she loves Telluride. I was there in the fall of the year and experienced rain and snow all in one day, but the scenery was breathtaking.
It is.
Nice. Well, good morning to everybody. Great to have y'all here. Good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are. I'll tell you, and by the way, that was Michael Chavez. Thank you, Patrick.
There it is. Yes, that's right.
That's such a great story. All right, so you're in the right place at the right time with the right guests. We want to hear from you. We want to get your questions, all questions about Mike, his journey, the supply chain industry, you name it. Y'all get him in, and we're going to try to pose those to him as we work through the next hour. So with no further ado, though, Greg, I want to welcome in the one and only Mike Griswold, Vice President Analyst with Gartner.
Na.
Take it away. I don't think they're waiting on you to finish that intro. I love it.
Sorry.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Sorry, Mike, I didn't do the second part.
No, that's all right. I was waiting for some maybe Elvis walk-on music, but that's all right.
Yeah, sorry.
Given the previous discussion. Hey, everyone, great to be here. Great to have a chance to chat with everyone.
Mike, always a pleasure. Love our monthly check-ins with you, as does our audience. One of our longest running series, and great to have you here. So, Greg and Mike, before we get into some of the questions, and folks, again, as you have questions you want to pose about industry, especially retail supply chain, get those in. We're going to pose those to Mike over the next 50 minutes or so. But the heavy hitting questions first. It's National Fried Chicken Day, folks. National Fried Chicken Day. Enough said. So,
Yum.
Mike and Greg, and we'll start with Mike. Where have you had the best fried chicken experience in your life?
So when I was a kid, I grew up in a small town in Western New York, and my dad was a teacher forever. And one of his teaching friends had a chicken barbecue business in the summer. So as one of my summer jobs, I would work with him. So he had a pickup truck and a trailer, and haul all the stuff to wherever we were doing the chicken barbecue, set it up, do all the cooking. That's probably where I've had my best barbecue chicken is in an outfit like that. Partly because, you don't get to eat until everyone else eats, and you don't get to eat really until all the work is done. So you've worked up quite an appetite, but that probably would be my best barbecue chicken. When my wife and I go out, or we go out with the kids, usually I'm not a chicken person, so I don't usually look for chicken. But that, when you were talking earlier about, barbecue day, fried chicken day, that's probably been my best.
Okay. All right. That all sounds delicious and sounds like a bunch of work. Greg, I'm coming to you next. But before I do, good afternoon, Daniel from Brazil. Great to have you here via LinkedIn. Parvez is tuned in. He says, good evening, Mike, from the UAE. Great to have you here, Parvez. All right. So, Greg, we're talking National Fried Chicken Day. What's your favorite?
Well, as you know from my good friend Mike Mills, Scott, that
Yes.
I'm a fried chicken connoisseur. So I would have to say it all started with my great grandmother's fried chicken in a cast iron skillet with real grease, not even what's that manufactured grease? I mean, it was real lard.
Lard, yeah.
Crisco.
Crisco.
Yeah. With
Loretta
real
Lynn.
lard.
You just let down Loretta Lynn and all those Crisco commercials, if you remember them. Anyway, go ahead.
And that was always fantastic. And, a lot of family around, so that kind of probably started my love for it. But actually, probably the best fried chicken I've ever had was in China, which is a thing there, right?
Okay.
They love to fry it, especially the wings and whatnot. But man, fantastic. China. And locally, relatively locally, there's this small chain called Champy's Fried Chicken. Chicken in a 40 is kind of their tradition.
Okay.
And there's one in Chattanooga that's really good, and one in Athens, Georgia, that's very good. So every time I go visit my daughters in college, we go to Champy's. I eat fried chicken. They're both vegetarians, so they eat potato salad, right?
They get the potato salad in the 40, and you get the fried
chicken. They get
a
salad in a 40 instead of a chicken in a 40. Right?
Well, gosh, y'all both paint a delicious picture. I would just add Hattie B's, which is a bit, I guess you call that a chain now, but it's still really good. Started in Nashville. Of course, Prince's Chicken in Nashville as well. But Justine's Kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina was around for a long time. And unfortunately, I believe the pandemic was the final. They shut down a couple years ago. And I think the front end of the pandemic kind of made that decision for them. But wonderful, wonderful homemade fried chicken and other food. So, okay. Every day, everything has its own national day. Who would have thunk?
Can you guys just take it from here? I'm just going to go get some lunch.
Right. So we're going to ask, let's see here. Mike, one comment here. Korean fried chicken in Seoul is amazing. That's a interesting thought.
Skin on. I mean, it's super crispy. Yeah.
And Mahima, great to see you via LinkedIn. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Great to have you here today. Okay, so I know one of the things, Mike, as we get started and get past fried chicken, which I think had all of us standing and maybe drooling a bit. I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough when it comes to Mike Griswold, because we focus so much on your analysis and the research work you do and everything you're doing at Gartner. But man, your background is pretty fascinating. Some folks may not know your previous industry experience in the grocery business with Albertsons and Shaw's supermarkets. So I want to start there. And Daniel, I'll see your first question. We'll get to that next, I promise. But what's one thing, Mike, that might surprise our listeners about the grocery business sector?
Well, I think it's interesting because and I think Greg will probably concur with this. If you think about the grocery industry 5 to 10 years ago, I think we would have politely put them as kind of laggards when it comes to technology adoption and even, process type of adoption. Change management was always a big focus, when you're talking with supermarket retailers. If I fast forward today, while I wouldn't necessarily call the supermarket industry, leaders, I definitely have seen a shift in how they're approaching and adopting technology, especially
Hmm.
in areas like e-commerce. So if you think about where we were pre-pandemic and you think about how we've come out of the pandemic, the food industry has actually done a really good job of improving that buy online, collect in store experience, that buy online, curbside, all of those things where you don't really want to go in the store. They've actually done a really good job of that. And if you think about the other area, I would say they've done really well, we may not like it or appreciate it, is what they've done with their data relative to direct marketing.
Yep.
And they've come a long way in recognizing what they've had in terms of an untapped potential of all of this. I mean, just think about how much data a supermarket retailer has about all of us, right? And how much time we spend there, what's in our baskets. And I think, when I think of people like Sainsbury early on and what they did with dunnhumby and the ability to understand your basket and then send you stuff to entice other purchases based on what you bought, not that long thing you get at the checkout, which is the coupons for things you're never going to buy, right? So I think in some ways over the last 5 to 10 years, the grocery industry has really accelerated how they think about and how they use technology in ways that if you'd have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said no way, right? Just because of the slow rate at which they were adopting technology, and even
Right.
things like some of the processes like sales and operations execution that's starting to get more traction in the food space. So they've undergone, in my opinion, the biggest transformation of any segment of retail in terms of where they were to where they are today in terms of things around technology.
So, Greg, I'm going to come to you next for a quick comment, but really quick before I do, at least once a week, I see someone on my social feed. A lot of times it's Facebook that complains about the self-checkout lanes, and there's a variety of in the grocery business. There's a variety of conspiracy theories around why that happens. But here recently, after I saw comment number 1,279, the complaint, I looked into research and kind of the market trends. It is now the majority of shoppers actually prefer to get in, not talk to anybody, check their stuff out, and get out. It's that's what folks are demanding. But that's where I lie. Rarely do I interact with anyone at the grocery store. But Greg, comment on that or comment on kind of Mike's observations about the grocery business.
So I may have been the very first complainer. I used to go to the store and say, "Do I get a discount because I'm saving you on labor by doing the labor myself?" Right.
Right.
But and I think, and I am only allowed to buy a few things at the grocery store because otherwise it takes me an hour to go through the store. It actually has saved them some labor for the store manager because my wife used to call in. She knew the store manager at our local Kroger so well. She would call in and say, "I'm sending my husband in. This is what he's looking for." And
Wow.
the manager would have somebody go collect the stuff. It was only a handful of things, but go collect the stuff and bring it to the customer service desk because I was so pathetic. He walked through the store. One time I was there for like 45 minutes to find, I don't know, whatever, 3 items. So I love it when it's only a few items. If it's a full basket, it's still worth getting the help from an actual human being.
Agreed.
But as the larger picture of grocery, Mike, I can't help but think about the fact that virtually everywhere else in the world, grocery stores have perpetual inventory, meaning they know what they have on hand and they have a system to manage to that. And here's a little history lesson for you. Because grocery stores evolved from general stores who used to have hawkers, have people who came around and managed the inventory for a store, right? Our grocery business grew up a lot differently, and it has really set them back. that Mike managed in the days when that was really prevalent and was able to do the good things that he did for Albertsons is truly impressive, because they often don't know what they have or didn't back then. And I think that's still the case with some of the lines where some of the big brands, they come in, they send someone in, they scan the product, they then send the driver in the next day to deliver it, or, on their regular route. So Coca-Cola, Wonder Bread, whatever, you name it, there's all kinds of products where the grocery store doesn't know or really doesn't care what they have on the shelf, because they've sold that shelf space such that it's almost a tiny little store inside their store to that vendor. I don't know if everybody in the States really knows that.
They probably, if they do, they probably don't appreciate it as much as what you just laid out. We've got a couple of questions. I want to shift gears, and Greg, I want to circle back to the auto parts industry in a minute and pose the same question to you. But first off, we got a lot of self-checkout lane lovers between Amanda and Catherine and myself. Gene Pledger, when you pay with your app and not even stand in line. I'm with you. We've got a Nashville chicken recommendation from Brenda. We'll have to check out Manel's. But here we get, kidding aside, Daniel Hartnett has got a very serious topic and piece of legislation. Of course, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is what he's referring to here. And I want to get Mike and Greg's take here. So Daniel says, curious Mike's thoughts on the potential impact of the new U.S. regulation, UFLPA, on China-dependent supply chains. So Mike, why don't you share your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a huge impact, primarily because I don't know that U.S. companies and companies that are sourcing from outside the United States have as much visibility. And I know, Greg, you and I have talked about this at length. I don't know that they have enough visibility deeper into their ecosystem as they're going to need to have, right? So it's one thing to know that this product is made in a certain location in a certain geography. It's another thing to know exactly how that product is made and assembled and who's doing it. Part of the challenge, though, in fairness to organizations, is in order to get that full appreciation, you almost have to go there, right? You almost have to have someone go through and tour the facility, tour the region, and be able to see with their own eyes kind of how this stuff happens. Now, we know that there can be a couple of challenges with that. One, someone may just not give you access. Said, thanks, but no thanks, you're not coming, which in its own right should send up some red flags around maybe we should be thinking about alternative sourcing. But the other element is, unless you can do this unannounced and as a surprise, right? When I was in the stores, before I was in grocery, I was in a department store. I ran the operations in a store. And the biggest joke was we always would get like a week's notice before a regional vice president was coming, or even the president was going to tour. You had like a week's notice. So, and no one cared what your labor budget was the week before, right? So, yeah, it's the same thing, right? If you give people enough notice, they can dust things under the carpet, dust things under the furniture, right, before you get there. And in some of the locations where this stuff is produced, you're never able to get a surprise visit, because if you showed up unannounced, you may be arrested and no one may ever see you again, right? So there's challenges with that. So I think it's a great question, and I think I would lump it under, people are just going to need to figure out how do they get more visibility, and how do they get deeper visibility into their system. That's going to be the challenge. And I think some of it is some organizations probably don't want to know. Other organizations want to know, and it's going to be difficult to find that out. But it's a great question, and I do think it's going to have a pretty big impact.
Agreed. Hey, really quick, Greg, I'll get your take here on a great question from Daniel, but that's such a great point Mike makes. It's like your ISO certification in the manufacturing space. You know when your examiner is coming. So Mike, oftentimes, Mike, to your point, it's not a pop-in surprise inspection. So, but Greg, your take on the UFLPA.
I love the foundational principle of it: guilty until proven innocent, and proven innocent beyond the slightest doubt. right? And I think that this is the only way that we can force bad actors to share enough to know. Today, to Mike's point, if we can't verify they're guilty, we assume or use cognitive dissonance to right, to consider them innocent. We need to invert that curve, and we need to assume guilt until they're proven innocent. Think of it this way. If you couldn't verify that any other supply chain partner was reliable, right, had an on-time, in full record or things like that, you would assume they couldn't get the job done. If you can't confirm that someone is doing good, you have to assume that they're not. And I think that this principle, as was evidenced in kind of a test case with CBP, with the Customs and Border Patrol, where they just rejected containers that came from Xinjiang unless they could, unless they could verify that they were not unethically sourced. I think this forces people out of the shadows, and I actually like it. It is going to be challenging, and it's going to be incredibly disruptive up to this point because, again, to Mike's point, most companies preferred to kind of sweep it under the rug or not dig that deep or couldn't dig that deep. And now they have no choice. And it's not just UFLPA. It's also the SEC. If you're a public company, you have to prove your sustainability. FINRA, the Financial Industry Rating Association, whatever the heck the A stands for, that now they have 3 stages of ESG compliance that they require, and it's a service to shareholders to alleviate risk from these kinds of threats. So it's going to be tough, and yet a lot of these companies could have seen it coming. But in classic company business retail style, whatever you want to say, we wait till it's mandated or a crisis before we do anything.
Wait until you're forced to walk the plank. Greg and Mike, good stuff there. And Daniel, again, great question to lead off. And to all of our listeners out there, we've got the next 30 minutes or so with Mike. Is Ask Mike Anything. So Daniel set the bar pretty high, but feel free, whatever y'all are curious about, to get Mike's take. We'd love for y'all to weigh in. Dr. Rhonda is with us. She's referring to that delicious fried chicken discussion we had on the front end. So appreciate you. Marlo is tuned in from Dallas via LinkedIn. Great to see you, Marlo. Helene is back with us. Helene, great to see you via LinkedIn. Let us know where you're tuned in from. I think that CP is probably a flag that was not converted over for the comment, but let us know where you're tuned in from, Helene.
I see the flag. That's interesting. You don't see it?
I don't see it. What country?
I'm sorry. I didn't look that close.
Okay.
It's red, white, and blue, but it's blue, white, and red. So
I gotcha. Okay.
Eastern Europe, somewhere, possibly Russia. Anyway, hey, real quick note for Dr. Rhonda. If Mrs. White's Golden Rule Cafe still exists, fantastic fried chicken there. Unquestionably the best in Phoenix. I would say the best in the Southwest, without a doubt.
Okay. So that's a great tip. And by the way, the production team is confirming it's France. Helene is from
France.
France. So great to see you here, Helene.
It's hard to see that flag. It's very small.
So, Mike, our next question.
So Greg, there's this pretty cool invention. You may have heard of them called glasses.
I'm on a very small monitor here, but you're right.
Okay.
Just trying to give you a little help there, Greg.
No, thank you.
I love it. And by the way,
Thanks,
Dr. Rhonda says, hey, wait until you're forced to walk the plank. Scott, oh my gosh, I do say that often as well to my clients when we're making some behavioral changes that appear and feel painful in the moment. Hey, Dr. Rhonda, kindred spirits. That does not surprise me. Okay, so Mike, next question comes in. It's about the Gartner Supply Chain Top 25.
Sure.
And so, as the name suggests, and as we've covered here plenty of times before with you, the top 25 comes out every year. The rankings were just released roughly a month or so ago, and it ranks some of the top performing supply chains, including the masters category, which are companies that constantly, they've just consistently performed. They're created, they've got their own category. But the question here is for the companies that ranked, 26th, 27th, right there on the cusp. What do you see, and how can those companies break into that pristine pyramid, the top 25 next year?
Yeah, there's a couple ways, Greg. If people, if you look at the methodology, right there's the financial component, and then there's the qualitative community perspective, the analyst and the peer vote, and we have the ESG component. The two elements that I think organizations, that are in that, say, 26 to 30, 35 range, things they can influence the most really come down to two things, right? One is the ESG component. So it's based on the accumulation of up to 10 points. If an organization, isn't at 10, that's an opportunity, because each point of ESG is worth 0.20 right to the composite score. So if you were an 8 and you went to 10, that's nearly half a point to your composite score right out of the gate. And when you're looking at, 26 to 25 was about 1/100th of a point. That's the
Wow.
difference between 26 and 25. And even if you go to 30, my guess is that difference is less than a single point. So looking at the ESG methodology, seeing if there's opportunities where you're not getting points. My message, though, to companies, particularly on the ESG component, is you should not be doing ESG stuff just to chase Gartner points. You should be doing ESG stuff because it's the right thing to do. So,
Right.
we have, Ethisphere produces an ethical company list. Bloomberg produces gender equality, a gender equality index. Those are worthwhile things that people should consider. But if you're already doing something at a different gender equality index, I'm not here to tell you do Bloomberg just so you get 2 points, right? But you should look across how we evaluate ESG, and if there are things that you're not participating in that make sense for you, you should look at that. But the other element is, and where I think the strength of the top 25 comes from, is, from its inception, we wanted to reward and recognize companies that shared their story. People that talk about the things that they're doing in the supply chain that will make the supply chain of everyone better, right? And again, we're not saying, give away, if we're talking about chicken, don't give away the secret sauce. What we are saying, though, is there's a lot of things that companies do that are very transferable and not proprietary. So get your name out there, talk in, social media, be involved in Gartner events and other events, right? Not just ours, where you can, because it's that peer voting that really can make a difference. And again, not to make people's eyes glaze over, but in the peer methodology, right? If someone votes for you in the number one spot, that's 25 points. If you get two people that didn't vote for you before that are now more aware of you, and let's just say, because I need simple math, right? They both put you at number one, that's 50 points
Right.
to the peer voting. So it is, and if you look at companies in the top 25, they all do a really good job of talking about their supply chain, whether that's frequent updates on LinkedIn, frequent updates on social media, putting out their own white papers. There is, to some degree, an obligation, if you want to be in the top 25, to share your stories. So those, Scott, would be two things. Think about where you are from an ESG perspective, and are you, and this is where I'll use the word aggressively in a positive way, are you aggressively telling your supply chain stories to the community?
All right. So, Greg, we've got a follow-up question from Mike in just a second from Dr. Kendra C. Taylor. Great to see you, Dr. Taylor. But, Greg, I'm going to get your quick follow-up based on what you heard there from Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think they ought to have a play-in game. It sounds like, Mike, there are a lot of teams on the bubble. if you think of it, right, in NCAA tournament standards. But I think that it is that close is really fascinating. Couldn't help but think that that's probably right. 25 to 30 is probably still less than a point separated. But I like the, whatever you want to call it, the caution, the warning, the notification. Don't chase points. Do good, right? And that will be evident.
Yep.
And especially now with the topic we just discussed, wherein there is no place to hide in supply chain or in ESG now, you will most definitely not want to be greenwashing. You know, the greenwashing is tantamount in the ESG and the financial world to crime these days. So it's important to be genuine, to have real plans. The requirements of the SEC now not only are that you have plans, and again, this is only for public companies, but if you work with a public company, you're going to have to be able to do the same thing anyway. It's not only to have plans to be carbon neutral or have gender, racial equality, or eliminate unfair trade practices, conflict minerals, and human rights violations from your supply chain, but it's also to be able to verify that you're doing it, how effective that's been, and now go outside your own four walls to those 6, 7, 8, 9 tiers of suppliers around the world and assure that they're doing it as well. So it's got to be a legitimate attempt, because in this day and age of transparency, it's too dangerous to do it any other way, and it's not really sustainable.
Right. Outcomes.
In any definition of the word, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Unlike college basketball, we will not be expanding the field. It will stay a top 25.
Okay, so it won't go to 128 teams.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
outcomes, and then and I love your comment there, Greg, about outside of your four walls, upstream and downstream of your supply chain. It's such an important point. All right, so we've got another great question here from a former guest, which we really enjoyed a chat when Jenny Froome was with us back a few months ago. And this is Dr. Kendra C. Taylor, who does, beyond her consulting business, she does a lot of great volunteer work with the Informs group, right? She says, got a question for Mike. Are you seeing companies using tech like blockchain or artificial intelligence to improve in the area of ESG?
Yeah, for sure. I think, we've all, I think, made somewhat tongue-in-cheek comments around blockchain is kind of a problem running around trying to find a solution, or a solution trying to run around and find a problem. So I think this is an area where we're starting to see blockchain grab some traction, is in the ESG space from a traceability perspective, to some of Greg's earlier comments, and authenticity. We're seeing it in the drug environment to make sure drugs aren't counterfeit. We've seen it in some of the luxury good areas to ensure goods are not counterfeited. So we're definitely seeing blockchain start to emerge in the ESG space. We're also seeing, other uses of technology, geosat location. So, there's a lot of work being done by companies that rely on palm oil to be able to use satellite image to check on forestation and deforestation and make decisions around that.
Yeah.
We're also seeing, if I expand this a little bit outside of sustainability, we've got some of the high tech companies using machine learning and AI for people with disabilities. So one of the high tech companies in our top 25 has developed technology that allows people with sight impairment to be able to do quality control testing on equipment using things like audio signals and things like that. So, we're definitely seeing technology be deployed not only in the traditional areas we see around the supply chain, plan, source, make, deliver, just as some examples, but we're also seeing it definitely in the ESG space for sure.
Greg, anything to add?
No, I actually, you've made me think of several questions, Mike. We're talking about what arguably, and I don't mean this in a bad way, arguably a trendy topic.
Mm-hmm.
But in as much as we're talking about these things that are highly impactful to companies today, I wonder, because you talk to companies and their solution providers all the time, is there anything that jumps out at you? I mean, not limited to ESG and maybe not even limited to supply chain, but I think we all understand that the economy is shifting globally, right? And that things are changing from the hard run that we've been on for 13 years to what will arguably be a different economic environment for at least a few months, possibly a few years. Is there anything you're seeing relevant or in response to that shift that really just jumps out at you as you talk to some of these retailers?
Yeah, I think, and it's not just a retail unique phenomenon. I
Yeah,
think
good point.
we had a period of time when, and I like the way you phrased it, Greg, and I'll try to keep it at that same kind of adult level, right? We had things were good, and the ESG was kind of a natural fill in when things are going well, right? When your business is doing really well, it's a lot easier to think about what are the things I want to do from an ESG perspective. If we keep this
Right.
more on the E than necessarily the S and the G. Now, what will be interesting to see is as we now go into a different economic reality for however long it lasts, we're now back to the question, to your point, around, are we still fundamentally committed to doing good, kind of regardless of the cost?
Hmm.
Or are we going to revert kind of pre-sustainability momentum where it was seen as an additional cost? It didn't necessarily was not perceived as an avenue to create value. What we've seen is you can be sustainable and make money at the same time. We have seen that, right? We've seen that for the last several
Yeah.
years. So my observation will be, or I guess my advice to organizations is you need to find a way to keep doing that. That when times are tough, you do not want to shut down any momentum you made around ESG. If for no other reason, Greg, to your earlier comment, people now have that expectation. Whether frankly you make money or not, that is the expectation. Expectation is you will consider how to do good for the planet and how to do good for people. And if
Right.
and if people make some course corrections now because of the economy, I believe they will pay a price for that in from a customer perspective.
Hmm. Okay.
Agree.
We mentioned, of course, artificial intelligence, one of the tools that Dr. Taylor mentioned there. And Greg, we've touched about this. We've touched on this a number of times. Sometimes the tools themselves need to be reinvented so that we don't have the hard coding, the hard programming, the assumptions baked into the artificial intelligence. Greg, you want to speak to that for a second? You're much more of the technologist than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that there are legitimate business cases for blockchain, have been for a long time. It's more the adoption. Speaking of baked in, it's more the recognition and the adoption that have been a hurdle than the technology of blockchain or AI themselves. Right? We continue to have AI do a better job of statistical forecasting, for instance, which is a misapplication of the technology, and blockchain we've used to monitor manual processes that are easily usurped by just failing to click the button on the scanner or whatever, right? So
Right.
there are lots of ways we need to adopt this, but um, and I think one of the things you're alluding to, Scott, is kind of the bias that can be built into intelligence. If, for instance, we've talked about this a lot. If you only show an artificial or computer vision tool, artificial intelligence or computer vision tool, men's shoes, then when you show it a woman's shoe, it will not recognize that as a shoe, right? So there's that possibility. And there are all kinds of unintentional biases that can be built into those things. And there are lots of, and have been for years, by the way, I don't think the world knows this, all kinds of synthetic
Right.
testing and training that can be done so that human bias is extracted from that. But the limitation is not the technology. The limitation is not the training of the technology. The limitation is the humans' adaptation, adoption, right, and acceptance. Oh, 3 A's. That was pretty good. Of the technology, or better yet, to the point both of you have made, to the outcomes that the technology can enable. And we have to be focused on those outcomes first. Like Mike said, don't make the products a hammer looking for a nail. Find the nails, and then go find how and if how hammer can apply.
Love that. Love that. Dr. Rhonda says ethical practices versus profit. Choice, matter, and impact us all. Eventually, best to think about longevity and think about the implications. Nicely said.
Good luck with that. I'll tell you, I mean, the greatest economic principle ever is enlightened self-interest, right? Let me repeat that. Enlightened self-interest. Companies will never not be self-interested. They will never not be profit-focused. What we have to do, to Mike's point, is we have to illuminate how ESG, how doing the right thing leads to profit. And, my opinion on that topic is that, again, there's no place to hide. Supply chain is in the forefront thanks to the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. ESG is in the forefront thanks to innumerable offenses by companies, large, small, of every manner around the world, right? Anywhere from diamonds, the greatest offenders on the planet, to sports clothing, right, which is heavily produced in Xinjiang province, and others. But there's no place to hide now. And I think what people have to recognize is that supply chain effectiveness and ESG effectiveness, doing the right thing, hit the top line as much as the bottom line, because someone could choose, and more people will choose, not to do business with companies that refuse to acknowledge unethicality in their business.
So, Mike, I'm going to give you the final word on this topic, and I'm going to share a couple of comments, and we are getting close to the top or bottom of the hour, whatever the case is. Mike, your final comments.
Yeah, I concur with Greg. There is more and more research that says the ESG perspectives of an organization and a brand are rapidly climbing the consumer decision tree. I think we're also seeing data that suggests there is actually starting to be a shift with more people actually voting with their wallets. I think we still have a gap, but I think what the point I think people need to acknowledge is the number of people that are saying that's important to them is going up. The number of people that are actually voting with their wallet is going up. There is still a gap between those two, but the gap is narrowing. And if the gap ever is eliminated, the companies that have been kind of lagging are going to be in big trouble.
Big trouble.
Big trouble.
Yeah. Very nice. And by the way, thank you, Andy. The top of the hour, he says, is the 1 o'clock, the 2 o'clock, the 3 o'clock.
It's when the big hand is on the 12 is the top of the hour.
Math is not my thing. Math is not my thing. So, hey, Kim Winter, the one and only Kim Winter, is with us here today. Kim says, thanks for the discussion, team. Good question, Greg, in regards to ESG. And to your answer, Mike, 100%. The clear message we get as an international recruiter from candidates globally is that an employer's stance on ESG is an essential part of decision-making when candidates are looking at a new job. Excellent, Kim, and safe travels. Kim Winter's everywhere. I'll tell you what, based in Dubai, but he is, if it's a logistics or supply chain leadership conference, he is there in person. I love it. Okay, so let's have a little fun. I got 12:48. We got Mike for a few more minutes here. It's July. On a much lighter note from what we've been talking about, I would like to, hang on a sec. Kim says, you guys are ranking above my other screen. The BBC commenting on the demise of the UK Prime Minister tonight. Hey, we'll keep on with. We'll whistle right past that for now.
Just remember, you're no longer in the colonies, Kim. That doesn't even matter to you anymore.
Rhonda says, Greg, great point. Switch the focus a little to our more lived practices and self-interests.
Rhonda, not that yours was not an outstanding point. It's just we have to acknowledge that shared approach, right, of both profit and do the right thing. And I've just seen it too long. Companies will not change. They cannot. They should not.
Right.
They owe it to us, their shareholders, and their customers to make money and be sustainable in that way.
So, all right. So forget what I said a minute ago, because we're not going to talk about vacation day. We just got an excellent question from Sheldon, and I'm going to pose this out there to you and Mike. We're going back a little bit to the UFLPA discussion we had towards the beginning of the show. And Sheldon says this, and great to have you, by the way, Sheldon. there is a shift taking place in the global power dynamics. We have seen BRICS, Brazil. I can't remember what the acronym stands for.
Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
Yes. BRICS and LDCs reevaluating the relevance of certain relationships with regard to self-interest. Will, in Sheldon's words, exclusionary U.S. laws such as UFLPA aimed at improving visibility in supply chains end up hurting U.S. companies more than helping them? Mike?
Yeah, Sheldon, that's a great question, and I think
It is.
I think I guess I'll say unfortunately, I think the answer to that is yes, depending on your size, because I think in some instances, the supplier probably does have an opportunity with some people to say, hey, you know what, if you don't want my stuff, someone else will, right? Or I don't care if you want visibility, I'm not going to share that with you. So I think based on an organization size, they may run into some challenges where suppliers have more leverage than they do, and you may just say, you know what, you're now becoming more trouble than you're worth.
Right.
Go find your product someplace else.
Mm.
I think what's incumbent though is it's incumbent on the organizations with the larger market share to kind of keep an eye out for these other companies like a big brother or a big sister and say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with you. Now you may be able to get away with not selling stuff to Mike's sporting goods store, but you cannot get away with not selling stuff if I'm I'll use Dick's as an example, right? Dick's Sporting Goods. And I think it's these larger brand owners, it's these larger retail organizations that are going to have to make a stand. And then as a byproduct of that, I think some of these smaller companies, can be protected, if that's the right word. But this goes back to Greg's kind of self-enlightened self-interest. This is where some of these larger companies have to put the industry and their policies first ahead of maybe not necessarily profits, but they need to be keeping an eye out for everyone in their industry and in their sector, and it's going to take the large companies to do that.
Well said,
in my
Greg.
opinion.
I'm coming to you next, but really quick. Our dear friend Jenny Froome is with us here today, and Jenny adds that BRICS, plural, as it were, maybe Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Ah,
Jenny,
that's a new addition. I did not know that. I didn't even notice the S. I never even.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for being the wonderful ambassador that you are, and look forward to catching back up with you soon. Okay, Greg. So to Sheldon's question, is it going to end up hurting U.S. companies more than helping them?
Yes. In the short term, unquestionably, because they're not ready for it. They've denied, they've been in denial about this happening. So yes. And to Mike's point, yes, certainly. I was thinking about this. I wrote a commentary a week or so ago about this very topic, and imagine some influencer out there who's having whatever coffee cups painted with their face or whatever these YouTubers do, and they're being made in the wrong place. They're going to tell them to stuff it, just like Mike said. So the other thing we have to acknowledge is, in large measure, we, the United States, and other countries of the Western world, I guess you would say, whatever, the first Western world, we're mandating our principles on these other countries that may not share the same principles or may not have the same capacity to live up to those principles. I heard someone call it, and I don't agree, but I think this is a valid analysis. ESG is the new imperialism. It's how we project our principles on them, like the English projected the English language, and the U.S. had projected Christianity and other things on other countries, because that's the way we see the world. And for those countries that don't see the world there, and some of these are unbelievably bad actors, right? I mean, Brazil, I love Brazil. It's a beautiful country, but they are one of the highest offenders in terms of destroying the rainforest. Indonesia, likewise. China, I don't think we need to say more there. Pick a violation and insert China. So we have to understand that this is going to come to, we're going to come to loggerheads over this, unquestionably.
Well, I'm so disappointed, Greg, that you don't tell us exactly how you really feel with your responses. Now, of course, I'm kidding.
Well, I think we have to be realistic about it, because politicians have the luxury of casting these things out there to gain votes, and then they disappear in 8 years.
Right.
Well,
right. And
how they invent cover.
They don't have to pick up the pieces or live, and they live above the way the rest of us live, so they don't have to live with the shattered remains of the world when they cause these ridiculous things to happen.
Agreed. Okay. All right. I hate to leave the conversation there, but Mike, I know you've got a pressing commitment at the top of the hour. Let's make sure folks know how to connect with Mike and Gartner so that you can tune into this type of analysis and research that really is very practical and valuable to business leaders. Mike, how can folks connect with you and Gartner?
Sure. LinkedIn for me, Mike.Griswold, Gartner.com, if you're looking to just understand more about what we do at Gartner. But love to hear from people, love to talk about the supply chain, and certainly these other little random things that we manage to talk about. I always enjoy the conversations.
I appreciate that, Mike. And as always, the good news, some of it is Mike is getting better and better at LinkedIn. So make sure you connect and reach out.
Better and better. Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a step. It's the relentless pursuit.
Baby steps.
Yes.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Mike,
it's funny how people kind of dive in and out of your feed, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to have to go check you out, Mike.
Well, hey, Mike Griswold with Gartner, always a pleasure. Really appreciate what you shared here over the last hour and looking forward to next month.
Me too. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right. Let's see. Daniel, got to run, but great episode. Thanks for leading off with your question, Daniel. I appreciate your perspective and great question. Jenny Froome got a kick out of these YouTubers comment from Greg White. I did too, Jenny. And thank you for your
probably should have said influencers. I mean, not all whatever. It doesn't matter.
That's right. Shelly Phillips completely agrees with Greg, and
thank you,
always
Shelley.
Great. Big fan Jenny is of Mike and of Greg. So good stuff there. Okay, Greg.
Mike especially, I hope. Man, seriously, I still am not certain that we all understand the presence of greatness that we're all in whenever he's on the show. I mean, been there, done it, continues to do it. Hundreds, thousands of companies get their guidance on supply chain from Mike Griswold. Big ones.
Agreed.
Huge.
Now, and thanks to our audience for kind of bearing with us. I think there was a Fortnite tournament just down the block from Mike's home studio today.
Oh, he was pretty good. He was pretty good on my end, just cut a couple of times. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I think it's a roll of the dice, the
roll of the dice. Well, hey, Greg, always a pleasure to knock out this stuff with you. Always a pleasure to have Mike here because I agree. He really, he's the type of, analysts and researchers and thought leaders, all those terms, much like some of the comments we're seeing are thrown around, regularly these days. But man, he is the real deal Holyfield, and always a pleasure to have him here for his monthly appearance with Supply Chain Now.
Agreed.
Now, with all that, I want to circle back to this opportunity we've got with folks. Hey, check out this July 12th working session, Leveraging Logistics for Ukraine. Love for you to get involved and donate or help facilitate if you can. But like Greg said earlier, just show up. There's no need. There's no obligation. There won't be any arm twisting, right? But y'all check that out. The link is in the comments from earlier in July 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. I love the outcomes, as you and Mike and we all talked about. So important, feeling good gestures. It's not good enough. It's what are you doing? What are the outcomes? What are the results? And to have almost 10 containers now on their way to folks, chock full of things they need, as coming from their voice. No assumptions. I mean, part of these working sessions are to tune in to the folks there in Ukraine and Poland and elsewhere and let them tell us what their specific needs are. So I love that type of really focused effort. Okay, Greg, I'm going to before I sign off here, I want to get your final challenge, your final comment, whether it's something you or Mike shared or someone from all the comments. But what's your final thought before I sign off here today?
The world is watching. I think it's important for us to know that as supply chain professionals, we begged for this, right? We begged for this recognition, for this seat at the table, for the command and control that the supply chain should long have had. We've begged for it to be recognized as something greater than brute force and cost savings, and we got it. And we got it in spades, and we've had it now for over 2 years, and we need to make sure that we are living up to that challenge, that we are transparent, we are forthright, we are ethical, we are effective, and that we're ready to change as the market changes. Because laggard, a great word that Mike used today, is arguably one of the core tenets of supply chain. We don't move very fast, we don't innovate very rapidly, and we need to start changing our perspective to do that. We need to take some risks to alleviate risks in the supply chain.
All right. That's the final word here today. Big thanks to our production team, Chantel, Catherine, Amanda. Hope wherever Clay is today, he's hitting that little white ball straight and far. Big thanks to Greg. Of course, Mike Griswold for joining us. Big thanks to all the folks that showed up in the comments. Great questions and comments. That's always one of my favorite parts. But anyway, on that note, Scott Luton signing off with my dear friend Greg White here for now, challenging you, man. This last hour gives you all the reasons and then some to do good, to give forward, and to be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.